and welcome to another episode of Haga Plays. A few days ago, Metal Jesus Rocks posted a video where he talked about games he'd like to see on the Nintendo Switch. As I'm really looking forward to the new system, I've decided that this week's episode will be a response of sorts. However, as I want my video to be a standalone piece, I'm not actually going to comment on what Metal Jesus said. Also, he was completely right on everything he said, so there's really not too much to comment on. Beyond that, I don't want to actually repeat what he said, because that's just unoriginal. So, if you wonder why my list is missing games I should obviously want to see, that's why. This video is going to be slightly shorter than usual, in part because I want to see how many of you like it, in part because good stuff is happening in my life. So I'm recording this and next week's video back to back. Anyway, let's do this! Number 5. In the video covering what I wanted to see at the January Switch unveiling, I very quickly mentioned Propeller Arena, a complete but cancelled Dreamcast game. It was developed by Sega's AM2 team, the same team that created Outrun, Afterburner, Virtua Fighter, and Shenmue. It was supposedly cancelled after 9/11, which happened only a few weeks prior to the game's intended release date. The developers quite simply found it inappropriate to release a game where players would fly airplanes in a city between skyscrapers and shoot each other down. A more recent theory, however, is that the game quite simply was cancelled because Sega wanted to cut the Dreamcast's life short. After all, the game was unveiled at the same E3 that Sega said that they were getting out of the console business. Propeller Arena was a heavily multiplayer-focused flight combat game, which was going to basically be the ultimate online experience for that console, or for any other console for that matter. What I want to see is a sequel featuring all the features you'd expect from a modern multiplayer game, upgraded graphics as well as more planes and environments. A bit of wishful thinking would be that the game would include a library editor like Forza Motorsport, and of course an awesome single-player campaign. Number 4. Number 4 on this list is kind of vague. Basically, I want the Switch to have its own signature FPS franchise. As someone who gained interest in gaming on the N64, I find the FPS genre to be highly important. After all, with games like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Duke Nukem, Quake, Doom, and Turok, the venerable N64 was the go-to console for shooters back in the day. So from a personal standpoint, I'd like to see the Switch regain that crown. Metal Jesus mentioned Metroid Prime, but that was really only an FPS at first glance, as that's more focused on puzzles and exploration than on shooting. What I want is something like a modern reimagining of Perfect Dark and GoldenEye, to basically go in the direction that the Rare staff intended to. I want to see an FPS featuring large and open environments, where the player can choose how to finish their missions. Advanced stealth mechanics, akin to Hitman 2, side by side with the option to mow down everything in sight with dual pistols, like in a John Woo movie. As it's 16 years since Perfect Dark came out, gameplay should of course be improved with some modern features like weapons customization, iron sights, and takedown animations, but perhaps not regenerating health. And of course, I like to see a multiplayer mode that's as fully featured as that in Perfect Dark. All of you who've spent any time playing the multiplayer in that game will know that the amount of options is just batshit insane. And for all of those who don't know, please check the next week's video. Number 3. When looking online, this is something that keeps on popping up time and time again. Diddy Kong Racing was another example of Rare looking at what Nintendo were doing at the time and deciding to one-up everything they did. This year marks the 20th anniversary of that game. Damn, saying that makes me feel old. Anyways, I'm on the bandwagon and I want to see Diddy Kong Racing 2 come out for the Switch. Of course, it doesn't have to actually be a new Diddy Kong Racing game. I wouldn't mind if Nintendo would incorporate the standout features of that franchise into Mario Kart. In fact, I'm much more keen on the character roster in Mario Kart than that of Diddy Kong Racing, especially if you remove Banjo and Conker, as Rare still own the rights to those characters. But considering Nintendo seemed to want to keep Mario Kart a fair bit casual and quite multiplayer focused, I don't think that they'll be very keen on adding a complicated adventure mode and 3 separate vehicles to master. Keeping Diddy Kong Racing as a separate franchise could allow a creative company to incorporate new and original features which would have been deemed too frustrating for a more casual crowd.
Number 2.
GTA is one of the absolutely biggest franchise out there. GTA 5 had the largest budget of any game in history, and it sold ludicrously well. So of course, I think it would be absolutely crucial for Nintendo and the Switch to have an entry in that franchise. And while just getting a port of the next game would be great for the Switch, that wouldn't really make an interesting entry in this video, would it now? So this is a deal. Retro Studios were split into 2 separate teams quite early in the Wii U's lifespan. This month, it's 3 years since their last game, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. And while they actually have been active helping Nintendo and other companies out with their Wii U games, one might wonder what the odds are that one of the games that they're working on is a Switch exclusive entry in the GTA franchise. It's not as unlikely as you might think. Nintendo have done this kind of thing before. Obvious examples are Ridge Racer 64 and Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. Imagine a brand new game based on the GT5 game engine that takes place in Vice City, a complete reimagining of the city and the surrounding area that's as big and as detailed as Los Santos. Perhaps it could include an equivalent to the Florida Keys, or even a small version of Cuba and Havana, so that players can smuggle people and drugs back and forth. In terms of when the game should take place, that's a pretty open question. A game that takes place in the present day would of course be neat, but revisiting the 80s would be brilliant. Why not the 50s? Drive some massive Cadillacs, fly vintage World War II fighters, participate in the Cuban Revolution, and make fun of the idealized image of how amazing everything was back then. Perhaps the new GTA could retain the 3-character mechanic and incorporate the franchise's first Hispanic and female protagonist. Hell, do both with the same character and cast Michelle Rodriguez for the job. Just 'cause she's awesome. Oh, okay, and because I've got a crush on her too. Wait, did I just say that out loud? Oh,
Number 1.
This is something I'm absolutely adamant about. Every single console worth its name has had a Gran Turismo clone for the past 15 years. I would love to see one of these games come out for the Switch. To me, these types of games aren't necessarily about driving the most insane cars around. It's more about driving a car that feels special to you. A car which looks and drives like something you feel no one else has. The possibility of buying the car that your parents drove when you were a kid and then building it into an absolute monster so that it crushes hypercars on the track. Or to buy a virtual version of the car you really own and beat the world in your car. Or even be able to preview what it'll look like with the decal or the wheels that you intend to get for it. And of course, living out the unattainable dream of getting your hands on the hypercar of your dreams and then spend a ludicrous amount of money on customizing it in a way that'll absolutely ruin its second-hand value. If Nintendo were to make a game like this, I like it if they incorporate some Nintendo magic into it. While there should be tracks based on real-world location like the Nürburgring and Laguna Seca, I still prefer imaginative levels with stunning vistas. Like Forza, I'd like the game to feature a library editor and the ability to change the appearance of your car. Not necessarily body kits like in Need for Speed, although that would be cool too. But I'm thinking more about the ability to mix and match stock parts from different year models. For example, wouldn't it be cool to get a Ferrari Testarossa and then give it the front end of the facelifted version, the 512M, while retaining the rear grille of the original version? A major issue with the Switch is of course the lack of analog triggers. There's a number of ways to work around this, but the fact remains that the best solution would be to create an even better version of the Pro controller. Throw on analog triggers, replace the transparent plastic with some brushed steel, and add glowing buttons, and you've got basically the ultimate controller. Nintendo even have a suitable IP for this. Excite. Think about it. Excite Bike for the NES was really realistic for its time. Excite Bike 64 was perhaps not a simulator, but it looked and felt quite realistic in my book. Since a game like this would be a massive leap, they could dip their toes and revive the Excite franchise by first releasing a smaller game where they mash Excite Truck and Excite Bike into one and make basically a game similar to the MotorStorm franchise. Tell me you don't want to see that. So, those were my 5 videos I'd really like to see for the Switch. Would you like to see them too? Perhaps you have some outlandish ideas on stuff you'd like to see in those games, or perhaps you have your own suggestions. Let me know in the comment section below. This has been Jacob Holgerson, signing out.